I recall first meeting Pat at a high school field in Florida during the strike in '95. The players were forced to work out on their own, and I was at my first Jays training camp. Had no idea who anybody was. I thought Mike Timlin was Pat Hentgen, but since that time, I've got a little better on identifying my Blue Jays. And Pat has become one of the 10 favorite players I've ever dealt with in 48 years of working in baseball and covering with the Toronto Star. And it's a pleasure working on this project with Pat for such a great cause. And thanks to you all for being here and reaching out in support of the Child Witness Center. One of the big reasons Pat and I agreed to be a part of this important presentation is family. Pat and I and our only wives have a combined 7 children, including 5 daughters. Pat, first question, how big a part of your adult life and how big a concern as they were growing up was the safety and well-being of your own girls?
Well, that's a great question. I think it starts with my parents. I got to see 2 great parents raise kids, and I think they were great role models for me. And then my wife and I have been together since we were 18. It was pretty much slam dunk. She had good parents, I had good parents, and we were able to provide that stability and foundation and rock for my daughters. And I think that it's probably the most important job you'll ever have, is being a father or a mother.
And as a professional athlete, you're on your own a lot, you're away from home. As you had your girls and as they were growing up, what kind of a difference did it make in your home life and in your personal life, being away and knowing that they were at home waiting for you?
Yeah, that's hard. Baseball's tough like that. You travel a lot, you're gone. You know, you're an absentee dad at times, and you try to make up all lost time during the off season. So it was critical that I had a great hook partner. I still do. My wife, she's rock. She keeps our family together. And she just did a great job with the girls while I was gone.
You were drafted and signed by the Blue Jays organization. You came up through the farm system, including a stint in St. Catharines, Ontario. What were your thoughts on being drafted by a Canadian team? And I know you're a Michiganer, but what was your experience with Canada before turning pro?
Not a whole lot in Canada. I'll tell you what, I spent my 19th birthday in Windsor because of the drinking age. And I think all of my buddies in Michigan, we did at 19. But I think the biggest thing was I was shocked. I didn't plan on getting drafted. I was kind of a late bloomer. I was a young senior. I was only 17 when I graduated from high school. So I sprouted up. I grew like 5 inches before my senior year. I went from shortstop to pitcher, and things just took off for me. I didn't have any idea about the Major League draft. There was no, cell phones, obviously, and all that kind of stuff. And we just didn't have the technology and the communication that they have today. I didn't even know if I was a good prospect. I was actually just trying to get a scholarship to help my parents for college. And that was really the main goal for me, was have good enough grades to get to college and play ball and help my parents pay for college. As far as the Canadian thing, I remember when I came home on day 1 of the draft, the first 5 rounds on day 1. And I remember my dad meet me at the door saying, you got drafted. And of course I'm thinking, by the Tigers, right? Because I'm from here. And he said, no, from the Toronto Blue Jays. I got to be honest, the only player I could name was Dave Steve back then.
And then they assigned you to St. Catharines, which is, you got, I guess, used to loonies and toonies in your pocket, and it was a good experience for you. But you were 17 years old, and the next youngest pitcher was 20, and you're all alone again for the first time. It's not high school. What kind of a lonely experience might that have been?
Very, very hard, very challenging. Cried myself to sleep a few times, very homesick. My parents were only 4 hours away. I think the Jays at that time put me in St. Catharines for that reason, because that was only 4 hours from my home. My teammates were very supportive. I can remember them like it was yesterday. Willie Blair, Bob Cavanaugh, and Xavier Hernandez, Steve Cummings, all the guys that I got drafted with, they were really good. They knew I was young. They really helped me out. I'd never been away from home, never been on a plane, never been in a taxi cab. It was a big, big adjustment for me. And in the end, I think it just came down to great support, family at home, my support system I had at home, and then also my teammates were very supportive.
Pat, what is it about baseball and sports in general that allows for teammates from 30 years ago to remain friends, for even though there's maybe 20, 25 years between times that you get together? I mean, it's universal that I've seen in all my time is some of those guys you stay in touch with, but rarely see long distance. And yet are able to remain best friends.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I still stay in touch with a handful of guys that I played with. And you're right. I mean, there's a connection when you play in the major leagues. There's a connection when you spend that much time together. There's a connection when you are with each other from mid-February all the way to October. And you're every day on the planes and on the buses and on the in the hotels and eating together. You just become so bonded together that it's just hard to break that bond. Even though your playing career's over, the bond just stays strong.
You mentioned Dave Stieb already, but you've all talked in the past about other mentors that you had, Jack Morris, Dave Stewart. What was the relationship with those older guys when you were breaking in with a very good Blue Jays team just prior to the World Series years in 92, 93? What was your relationship with those guys, and how did you learn from them? Was it a hands-on or just observational?
It was a little bit of both, actually. I remember my father told me, he said, you got a chance to play with Jack Morris and Dave Stieb. He's like, those two guys have been starting opening days for over a decade. He's like, I think you should pay attention to what they're doing, follow them around. So I spent my first year in September of 91 and all of 92 out of the bullpen. But in 92, I followed Jack around. I followed Dave Stieb around. I watched what they did. I watched their routine. I watched how they handled themselves as a professional. I watched how Jack was the most confident guy that I think I've ever been around when it was his fifth day. And I spent many times we had the sauna in the old locker room. And after batting practice, we would come in and we would go into the sauna together. And I would always go in there because he would talk shop with me and he would talk pitching with me. And looking back, I know that he knew that I was following him around, but it just goes to show you the character of Jack and Dave Stewart and Hankey and Ward and so many great veterans at that time that I was able to pick their brain from and watch them and learn.
As your own career progressed, and that's when I came in and started covering the Blue Jays, I noticed the same thing with other young pitchers and you. I mean, you won the Cy Young in 96, and all these young pitchers, the Chris Carpenters, the Roy Halladay's, the Kelvin Escobars, those guys were following you around and trying to soak up what you had. And my observation was that you were more of a leader by example. Did you know the same thing, that you had a responsibility to these young pitchers?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember doing my tubing and all my exercises and going through my routine. I'd glance over through the locker room and I could see Chris Carpenter and Roy Halladay staring at me. You're right. They did exactly what I did to Morris and Steve. And I think that, it's your duty to pass the baton. And I always looked at that as if Chris Carpenter and Roy Halladay are doing better for the Blue Jays, then we're doing better. And, it was all about winning for me. I really liked winning. I got to taste the World Series my first 2 years. And I never got to get back to the World Series. But to be able to smell the World Series and taste it and pop champagne, it was a feeling that you'll never forget. So I just wanted the team to do well. And I think that that's what it really came down to was, guys were looking at me as a leader. But you're right. I definitely was not the verbal type of a guy. I was definitely more of a guy that led by an example.
Stay with me on this story, Pat. I don't know if you recall it as well as I do, but one day at Innisbrook in the spring of 97, I hosted, for a feature in the Toronto Star, I hosted a golf outing at Innisbrook with Roger Clemens, Pat Hentgen, and Eric Hansen, who was probably the best golfer in the group. And we were playing, and I was writing, I was taking notes, and on this one par five, and I think I've talked to Pat about it before, but Roger Clemens hit a 300-yard drive and then an iron to the fringe. Pat scuffed a drive into the rough, hit a tree on his second shot, it bounced out into the fairway, hit a 3-wood to the fringe and 2-putted. Clemens chipped and 2-putted, both had a 5. And my thought was, here's 2 Cy Young Award winners playing golf, ending up with the same score, proving to me that you can end up with the same result as a pitcher or a golfer by going about it completely different ways. I mean, in this day and age, Pat, it looks like people are looking at the radar gun. 97 to 100 you need to throw. But from your experience and going back into the 80s, where there were some great pitchers who could barely hit 90, can you explain that theory? And if I was onto something there with the fact that everybody doesn't need to go about it the same way.
Oh yeah, there's lots of ways to skin a cat. I'll tell you what. I mean, I remember sitting in the bullpen my rookie year, and Dwayne Ward's like, "Yeah, I wasn't paying attention to the game." And he said, "Hey, rookie, are you watching the game? How do you get Palmeiro out?" And I remember thinking to myself, I don't get Palmeiro out the same way that you do, Dwayne Ward. You throw harder, you have a better breaking ball. You come in and pound up and in, and then throw your breaking ball in the dirt. I can't get people out that way. Everybody has a different way of attacking the hitters. And I think you're right. I think that Clemens was gifted with so much talent, with so much velocity, and so much ability to spot the ball. It was hard to compare yourself to him when I played with him. I couldn't really learn a whole lot watching him pitch because his weapons were so much better, and the way he executed his pitches were better. So you really have to find a guy in the locker room or a guy in the league that you can lean on and talk to based on your repertoire and his repertoire.
What's your opinion on that? I think I know on analytics of today's starting pitchers, where it's like twice through the order, then you're gone. Blake Snell was an obvious example in the World Series with the Rays against the Dodgers. Matt Shoemaker in game one of the wild card round against the Tampa Bay Rays this year. But to me, it seems like it's taking an aspect away from the game. And I just interested in your opinion, because like when you're expected to go through the batting order 4 times, there's a strategy. You go through the first time, you don't show them everything you got. You go through the second time, you make a couple of adjustments, maybe bring in the pitchers that you haven't used yet. Then you get to the third time. Could you explain how you went about the second, third, and fourth time through the order?
Yeah, I remember telling my dad, the 4th time through the orders really separates men from the boys. And that's a tough time. You're going through that meat of the lineup for the 4th time in the 8th and 9th inning, and it's probably going to be a pretty close game too, if you're still out there. And I think that the biggest thing right now with the starting pitchers is the analytics pushes the manager to make a decision. I think that's where I think that some of the managers fall into a bad choice when they automatically go with the analytics. Perfect example was last year with Snell. He was doing great and he gets taken out. And I think you can go back a few years with the lefty with the Dodgers too. I think he had a shutout through 5 and they took him out of that game too. And I think that if you look at the analytics and you use your eyes and judge how that pitcher's throwing, and then say, okay, he's struggling a little bit. The analytics says that he's not going to do that well through this lineup the 3rd time. Okay, but if the guy's dealing and he's rolling through the lineup and getting ahead of the hitters and nobody's making hard contact, I think you got to push the analytics aside a little bit and at least give that pitcher the opportunity to get through that lineup that 3rd time.
And after your career ended, and it was a terrific career, you retired, took some time with your family, then came back as a bullpen coach for a year or a couple of years, which is ironic because, I've spoken about this to you before. Is Pat and I were standing outside a hotel bar in Baltimore in the September of '96 when he won the Cy Young. And Pat was saying how relievers weren't real pitchers. They didn't deserve to be in the Cy Young balloting or conversation because they were all failed starters. And then I look up a few years later and he's the bullpen coach, and I'm going, oh my God, what's happening here? The world is upside down. But you were a terrific bullpen coach, and I thought it was because there's not enough time in a game to worry about mechanics, and you were so good at worrying about the mental aspect and helping these kids through what needed to be done on that day. Is that what your strength as a coach was?
I think that probably was my strength. I think it's building relationships with the pitchers. I think that I'm pretty good at that. And I've sometimes you just got a way of talking to somebody and making them feel good and, building up confidence. I know when I look back on my career, I struggled with my confidence, and I won a Cy Young and went to 3 All-Star games, and I still struggled with my confidence. So if you're a relief pitcher in Toronto and you're getting sent up and down, how's this guy's internal confidence? How much inner confidence does he really have? He might act like he's real confident, but deep down, he's probably got a lot of doubt. And I think all players have that doubt. So I think you're right. As bullpen coach, my first year, I think the second time I did it, I think I was better at it than the first time. But both times I felt like it was more about compete, prepare, trust the process. And when that gate swings open at Yankee Stadium, you got to go out there and get Derek Jeter or the new guy they just got, LeMahieu. You have to go about it and be aggressive and attack that hitter and be confident. So how can I have the 7 most confident guys in the stadium when that door opens up. And I don't care if you're confident when you're not pitching. I'm just talking about when that gate swings open. So I was big on trying to build confidence and aggressiveness.
When you guys don't realize it, but when we're in the press box, when I was writing, we're in the press box early, we see a lot of things. And one of the things that impressed me and sort of warmed my heart was when you weren't even a coach, you were just coming in for a visit from Michigan on a homestand, and one of your former pitchers was struggling, and he ended up asking you to walk around the warning track with him. And it was like about 3 or 4 revolutions of the warning track at Rogers Center, and you guys just were constantly talking. And the confidence that he had in you, even though you weren't a member of the coaching staff, and the cooperation, the ability that you had to sort of still relate to those guys really impressed me. I mean, how does that make you feel when a guy still comes to you and you're not on that staff?
It does. It makes you feel good. I mean, I was in player development for all these years. So, I mean, I had been able to build a relationship with some of these guys before they got to Toronto. I can't remember who the player is. Do you remember who the player was, Richard?
I think it might have been Sean Reed Foley, but I'm not sure.
Okay, that might be right, because I did have some conversations with Sean Reed Foley. I think that he's a guy that's got a high ceiling and great arm, and just has to really hone his mental game and his concentration level and how much of his focus and all that. So, yeah, it's a great feeling when you have players come up to you. I had this happen to me with Tim Meza. He came up to me and said something to me when I was doing the same thing. I was just up in Toronto for a PR thing, and he came right up to me and sat down in the dugout next to me, and next thing you know, a half hour went by. So it's really neat to build those relationships and have those linger.
We really appreciate your time, Pat. And just one more question. Getting back to family and sports, I remember writing a column a few springs ago about your dad who was sick. It was clear he was likely not going to make it. And what we spoke about was the common love of baseball that seemed to be a bond that you and your dad shared as he struggled with his health. And that was down to the very end. And could you just explain what sports and baseball and family, the link that keeps us all so focused and so emotional?
Yeah, my father, I was lucky. You know, I had probably the best dad ever. Hard worker, honest, loyal, integrity, the whole 9 yards. And, you know, baseball coach, he didn't know much about baseball. He was just a dad that wanted to be part of it. And next thing you know, he's picking up all the kids and we're all driving to practice together. And, you know, I remember when I made the high school team, he said, how do they do it in high school? We did our cutoffs and relays when I got to 9th grade ball, because, you know, my dad was just a great fan. And then as I became a good player and I got drafted, then it was like, whoa, you know, he always loved baseball, but then it's just like the next level. Wow, my son's got a chance to play professional baseball. And then the love of the game starts to really, really grow. But yeah, it's an incredible bond that father and sons have been able to share, and fathers and daughters. And, you know, just the joy that the Blue Jays and the professional baseball has given me and my family is just unbelievable.
Thanks again, Pat. And thanks to everyone for sharing their time and contributing to this great cause. And thanks, Dave Morneau.
Thank you.